Right now, you live in a world with no empires. That has never happened before. Not once. For 5,000 years, someone always ruled over everyone else. Empires rose, empires fell, and new ones took their place. So, what actually makes an empire? One group conquers many others and rules them all together. The first empire begins in Mesopotamia, around 2334 BC. A king named Sargon united dozens of separate cities into one state called Akkad. History remembers it as the first true empire. It lasted about 200 years before drought, famine, and rebellion tore it apart. And that becomes the pattern. Every empire follows the same arc: rise fast, expand hard, then crumble from the inside. Egypt didn't come after Akkad. It was already one of the oldest civilizations on Earth. But around 1550 BC, Egypt stopped simply defending its borders and started pushing beyond them. It conquered Nubia, the Levant, and lands beyond the desert. It was no longer just a kingdom, it was an empire. Egypt survived longer than almost anything else in history, but eventually Persia swallowed it. Then Alexander conquered Persia. Then Rome absorbed the remnants. Even Egypt eventually ran out of time. Before all that, however, came Assyria, a completely different kind of empire. The Assyrians ruled through fear, brutal, efficient, and terrifying. They built the first true professional army in history, and by 670 BC, they controlled much of the Middle East. But in 612 BC, their capital burned to the ground. The people they had terrorized for centuries united against them. The empire that ruled through fear died the same way it lived. Next came Persia. And Persia played an entirely different game. Cyrus the Great conquered vast territories, but didn't destroy the people he defeated. He allowed them to keep their gods, languages, and laws. It was a revolutionary idea. Rule without erasing the cultures beneath you. At its peak, Persia governed nearly half the world's population. No empire before or after ever reached that share of humanity. Then, one man ended it all. His name was Alexander. By the age of 30, Alexander the Great had conquered the entire Persian Empire and pushed all the way into India. He never lost a battle. Then he died at just 32 years old. No heir, no plan, no successor. His generals immediately turned on each other, and the empire splintered within years. Build an empire around one man, and it dies with him. Then came Rome. Rome learned from everyone who came before it. Instead of relying on one ruler, it built systems, roads, laws, citizenship, and institutions designed to outlive any single leader. At its height, Rome stretched across 3 continents. It survived for more than 500 years as a unified state, but eventually it became too large to manage. Corruption, debt, and endless invasions slowly drained its strength. In 476 AD, the western half fell to Germanic tribes. Rome was gone. Or at least half of it was. The eastern half survived as the Byzantine Empire for another 1,000 years, until 1453, when Ottoman cannons shattered the walls of Constantinople, and the final piece of Rome disappeared forever. While Rome struggled, another giant was rising in the east. The Han Dynasty ruled China for over 4 centuries. It invented paper, expanded the Silk Road, and standardized writing across an enormous territory. Eventually, peasant rebellions and warlord conflicts brought it down, fracturing China for centuries. Then, the Tang Dynasty reunified the country and transformed it into the wealthiest empire on Earth. But military rebellions eventually weakened the dynasty beyond repair, and it collapsed in 907 AD. While China fractured, something entirely new exploded out of Arabia. In just 1 century, the Islamic caliphate expanded across 3 continents. Faster than Rome, faster than Alexander, faster than any empire before it. Baghdad became the world's center of science, mathematics, medicine, and learning, while much of Europe struggled through the Dark Ages. Then, in 1258, Mongol armies sacked Baghdad. Libraries burned. Canals were destroyed. A golden age ended in a matter of days, because by the 1200s, the largest land empire in human history was just beginning. Genghis Khan united the Mongol tribes and unleashed a wave of conquest unlike anything the world had ever seen. Within decades, the Mongols controlled territory stretching from Korea to Hungary. It remains the largest contiguous land empire ever created. But once expansion stopped, the cracks appeared. There was no shared culture, no common system strong enough to hold everything together. The empire split into rival kingdoms and slowly faded away. Then the pattern changed. Empires were no longer just about land. They became about oceans, ships, and trade. Whoever controlled the sea could control the world. Two small nations on Europe's western edge figured this out first: Spain and Portugal. They crossed the Atlantic, claimed vast territories, and brought immense wealth back to Europe. But wars, debt, and stronger rivals gradually drained their power. By the 1800s, their empires were shadows of what they had once been. By the 1500s, three major empires dominated the world simultaneously. The Ottomans controlled the gateway between Europe and Asia. The Mughals ruled India, whose economy produced roughly a quarter of the world's output. And Britain was quietly building something even larger. The Mughal Empire fell first, weakened by succession struggles and internal revolts. Britain stepped into the vacuum and absorbed India. The Ottoman Empire fell next, shattered by World War I. That left Britain. At its height, the British Empire spanned every inhabited continent on Earth. 1 out of every 4 people alive lived under British rule. The sun, they said, never set on the empire. Then came 2 world wars. The first drained Britain's treasury. The second buried it in debt. Colony after colony demanded independence, and colony after colony received it. India became independent in 1947. Most of Africa followed by the 1960s. Hong Kong returned in 1997. The largest empire in history dismantled itself in less than half a century. So what replaced it? Not another empire, something entirely new. After World War II, the world reorganized itself around nation-states rather than empires. Borders became fixed. Conquest became unacceptable. Colonies became countries. Even the Soviet Union, the closest thing to a modern empire, collapsed in 1991. Today, superpowers still exist, but none openly rule vast conquered populations the way empires once did. For the first time in 5,000 years, no empire rules the world. And every empire that came before shared the same ending. They grew until they could no longer support their own weight. Akkad, Egypt, Persia, Rome, the Mongols, Britain. Different centuries, different continents, the exact same ending. Rise, expand, strain, collapse, every time. And that brings us back to today. You live in the only era in recorded history with 0 empires standing. History suggests that's not permanent, it's just unusual.